Anindita Balslev. We have had the opportunity of listening to her last year, and I was very impressed with the talk. And so I was looking forward to this talk today. I am looking forward to this talk today. Dr. Balslev is a philosopher of international repute. As the initiator of the forum Cross-Cultural Conversation, she has organized several key international conferences. She has a master's degree from Calcutta University and a PhD from University of Paris. She has been teaching and doing the research in India, France, USA, and Denmark. And she also serves on the board of important international organizations, and more importantly is a founding member of the International Society for Science and Religion, which brings us to today's talk. She has published a number of books. Some of the copies are here, so if you would want to take a look at these books after the talk, please feel free to do so. So Dr. Anindita Balslev today will talk about ethos of the Indian culture and contemporary science and religion dialogue. I invite Dr. Balslev to deliver the talk.
I would like to begin by thanking Umass Dartmouth, and especially the Center for Indic Studies and Center for Religious and Spiritual Life for inviting me to speak. As you heard, the topic of my talk is ethos of the Indian culture in the context of contemporary science-religion dialogue. I have been recently thinking about this subject quite intensely, actually, because I was invited by Zygon. I don't know whether you know the name. It is the oldest religion and science journal of USA, to contribute a paper on this topic. The reason is that the journal is going global because this year is its 50th anniversary. And those who are interested may like to look up some of the issues. I will, of course, be speaking of some of the themes and sub-themes that I've covered in the full paper that would come out at the end of this year. But then there are also other issues which I will tell you about the cultural experiences and other cultural experiences apart from the usual Anglo-American mainstream understanding, and how they view the interrelationship between science and religion. So that is the idea behind Zygon's endeavor. Well, I thought of sharing some of these ideas with you because, I feel that we really need to look at our contemporary scientific endeavors in the light of our age-old ethico-religious perceptions and convictions, and situate all these in a contemporary cultural context that has worldwide relevance. As I began to think what, generally speaking, renders an overall distinctive flavor to the science-religion dialogue in the Indian context, it seemed to me that the prevalent attitude in India, I'm generalizing of course, is not to consider science and religion as antagonistic enterprises, but rather to view these as forces which together could create a world where the persistent epistemological and ethical problems can get resolved to the benefit of humanity. In Indian thought, generally speaking, rationality and spirituality are never viewed as opposed categories. One of the crucial factors that certainly have played a significant role, I as a student of philosophy can vouch for that, in shaping this intellectual attitude is that Indian thought from a very early time focused on the importance of the notion of evidence, what is called pramana. Evidence was seen as necessary both for legitimizing the acceptability of specific sources of knowledge, as well as it is understood as the criterion by means of which any claim to knowledge can be tested. This was their notice. This is not just a merely modern invention. This has been a rather fundamental philosophical trait of the Indian cultural soil, and because of which it has not permitted any kind of, conflict between science and religion, or if you say reason and faith, as can be seen elsewhere. It has acted as a barrier to that kind of attitude. I will say more on this later on to tell you that this is a trait that can be traced back already from the Vedic period. And as you know, that Rig Veda can be traced back to 5000 BC. And despite all changes that have taken place over the centuries, this is a heritage that is still alive in India, and what gives a distinctive flavor to the Indian cultural soil. So far as the interrelationship of science and religion is concerned, a sentiment that is largely shared in India, you can see that was extremely well expressed by Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan. He, as you may know, was the first Vice President of India right after India's independence, and the second President of India, and happened to be a philosopher. And he observed, I'm quoting these two lines for you, he says, when people speak of conflict between science and religion, they do not appreciate the spiritual character of science and the rational character of religion. In any case, nowadays there seems to be a renewed interest in the old Indian records of investigations pertaining to such areas as cosmology, ecology, ethics, study of consciousness, etc., which are relevant for contemporary science-religion dialogue. Today, you actually have not told me for how long I'm supposed to speak. So, okay. You tell me 5 minutes before that. Today, since we are all ready to share certain aspects of a technological civilizational paradigm, irrespective of cultural differences, the interrelationship between science and religion has assumed special significance. But why so? I think it is because there is a strong feeling that along with the newly obtained capabilities that we have today, there also arise profound ethico-religious challenges. And let me give you just one example. If modern day biotechnology were engaged in cloning of living things, including human beings, how must we respond? There is a felt need to find out what options are available to us in such a scenario. Consequently, many are curious to know how diverse religions of the world respond to it. Also, would any form of cross-fertilization between science and religion be shunned or welcomed in the face of such capabilities? All these questions arise and call for serious reflection. As one looks at the conceptual scene today, it's an amazing experience to watch how differently the relationship between science and religion has been conceived in the recent past by thinkers and scholars. This is the scenario which is particularly significant from a cross-cultural perspective, as it provides a variety of interpretations of the cognitive processes that are involved in the scientific and religious endeavors, along with their eventual implications for both theory and practice. In the sphere of intellection, we find that there are some who do not consider these enterprises to be in any sense opposed to each other. That's one group. According to them, that both science and religion are engaged in deciphering, uncovering the various aspects of the mysteries of our own existence and of our habitat, entailing all that is living and non-living. Both are engaged in that endeavor. Inquirers who hold such views, they are of course earnestly asking for greater interaction between science and religion. However, there are also others for whom these ventures are entirely different and are so alien to each other that they strongly advocate either total avoidance or suggest a minimization of exchange between these two. Then there are still others. You all live in the United States, you must have seen such foundations, journals and things like that, which are engaged in doing what they call a theology of science. And then there are others who say a scientific study of religion. And from the title itself you can see the penchants that these people have for one or the other. Interestingly, these attitudes do not seem to depend merely on the distinctive temper of diverse cultural traditions. That's very important to remember. Our records show that how conflicting or complementary science and religion is in terms of methodology and goal. These are sort of looked upon as enterprises, whether they will support that yes, these are conflicting or complementary, do not depend on only which culture you are talking about, because these are present in all cultures. It could be in one culture, one is more present than the other. It could be in one historical epoch, one thing was more dominant than the other. That is the situation. And today, as we know, both in India and in the West, these are there coexisting, these views are there. In any case, some recent surveys have been made, recent studies have been made, which were particularly targeted to find out what is the attitude of Indian scientists towards science, towards religion. And that study shows that generally speaking, attitudes of Indian scientists are more positive towards religion than in the West. While I will refer to one such study at the end of this talk, I will also seek to describe to you the ethos of the Indian culture, especially in order to understand what can account for these attitudinal differences on the part of the Indian scientists. Why are they more positive than the scientists in the West towards religion? And then this is a vast area of investigation where one is confronted with a range of questions, some of which seem to be perennial and others are astonishingly new. It feels, as it were, that we have traversed a long way with confidence, only to find ourselves today standing precariously at the crossroad of cultures and disciplines, and we want to have a review of our entire trajectory. That is how humanity is poised today. Globally speaking, we have arrived at a moment when we must carefully choose a civilizational paradigm that must sustain us by creating a harmonious order, firstly among human beings of various races and ethnicities, then between human and other non-human living beings, animals and plants, and even with respect to the non-living aspects of this fragile planet, earth, fire, air, water, etc. This brings us to perceive that, in a way, the interaction of religion and science may perhaps be better understood as the interplay of science and human values. That is the way the editor had also fortunately phrased it. It is particularly relevant to notice that worldwide our present situation is one in which we are increasingly adopting the advanced scientific technology irrespective of cultural differences. Then we are not worried. We are all going for that, going for sharing the advanced scientific technology in many ways. And we tend to highlight our differences and ignore the commonalities when it comes to values. When it comes to the sharing of the technology, we are all agreeing. But when it comes to finding out what are the commonalities in the domain of values, then we are reluctant. Then we are not looking into it. We have not actually invested much energy or time in that direction. It is crucially important to acknowledge that today, due to the fast pace of human interactions and exchanges, aided by the fantastic strides of technology, there is happening an enlargement of our common public space. Now, as soon as there is a common public space and it is in the process of being getting larger and larger, there is a need for common norms of behavior, standards of interactions, what is acceptable, what is not. And these things cannot be done just like that. So this is where the concern for science and religion and how these are related to each other is coming to the forefront. And it is also indicative of the fact that we simply cannot ignore the question of values in our contemporary context. If we wish to pursue various genres of collective projects, or even for the sake of our own survival, the question of values have to be addressed. We find that such ideologies in favor of marginalization and exploitation of others using any criterion, say nationality, ethnicity, gender, race, these are still there, which are working for marginalization. As it stands, we seem to be living in a system of violence empowered by technology. Anyway, as we turn our attention to science-religion dialogue in the contemporary Indian cultural context, we cannot but note that the present conceptual scene draws much inspiration from our past cultural heritage. It is primarily so because despite all vicissitudes of history, this is exactly a very characteristic of the Indian soil, that the Indian tradition is a continuous process that certainly knows of change, but not of any serious break with the past, as far as ideas are concerned. However, in the modern higher education system in India, you find the same plight as in the West. And that plight is this, that India has adopted since the colonial period these university disciplinary structures, and you find that there are boundaries that separate science and religion, the study of that, and philosophy. Indeed, not unlike in the West, along with the demand for multidisciplinary approaches, by exploring certain themes of basic concerns, it is also increasingly recognized, and this is important to note, that there is a necessity for the formation of community of inquirers who are coming from different religious backgrounds, cultural backgrounds. Not only multidisciplinary, but also multiple traditions. And then we will get a new reading of situations. I have been pleading actually for some time that an authentic understanding of knowledge systems stemming from different cultures cannot be promoted without engaging in a vigorous cross-cultural conversation, which is the designation of the forum that I created. The existing customary monologue about the otherness of others just does not work for promoting science-religion dialogue. Indeed. Are you following? Are you following? Indeed, the distinct ethos of the Indian conceptual world can be traced back to the very early text Rig Veda. Now I'm taking you to the ancient text where I started with. And you see that this Rig Veda is considered to be the earliest record of the Indo-European history, where it begins with the question of the origin of the cosmos. This query may be said to belong to an epoch when there was no disciplinary demarcations between science and religion. The time when they were asking this question, what is the origin of the universe? You don't find a discipline called science and philosophy and religion, etc. Similar query seems to be part of the universal philosophical wanderings. Across cultures you will find these questions have been asked. And in a sense, can be said to have a perennial character. This is how disciplinary divisions have come to humanity much later down in history. There is a creation hymn in the Rig Veda itself, which asks, where from this creation? Kuto ayam visrishti. Here one comes across the notion of rita or order. It's a very important idea which is already there in the Rig Veda. This signifies not only that there is a law of uniformity of nature, but also that there is a moral order. So at the same time too, notice that human beings are not only members of a natural world, there is always a consciousness that we are also part of a moral structure, a moral order. This idea of order has bearing on how the occurrence of a phenomenon is to be explained. So the idea of causality is coming in. It is held that no event, either in the natural or in the moral sphere, is possible without dependence on some other factor. While reflecting on this, you know the man's name called A.L. Basham, who compiled a book called The Wonder That Was India. He made a very interesting comment. He said, we cannot escape the law of karma any more than we can escape the law of gravity. You can't escape, these are laws. With the rise of the schools of philosophy, one finds that the idea of causality gradually coming to the center. And those who are interested in the question of creation by God and how to explain the evils that are there in this world will be interested in knowing how the Indians were dealing with that questions. You know, their Indian speculations always adhered to the principle of ex nihilo nihil fit. That out of nothing, nothing comes. Being cannot come out of nothing. Being cannot be reduced to nothing. All these ideas were already there. And you know, in Sanskrit we say nasata vidyate bhava. From non-being, being cannot arise. But what is very interesting is that they have speculated on various possibilities of how to explain the origin of things. But the mainstream Indian tradition, which is still the Upanishadic tradition, has never accepted the idea that there is any God that could create ex nihilo. This is interesting difference between the things. Now, why did they say that? Because of this problem of evil. They said that there are disparities that can be noticed right from the very birth of human beings. And this vaishamya or disparity cannot be attributed to the Creator, that He is responsible for this. Then that is one reason why they never accepted the notion of Ishvara is there very much present, personal God is very much present, but it is never as a creator who creates ex nihilo, who can be held responsible for these disparities. Now, then there are also other ideas, like cosmological cycles, each spanning billions of years. Many scientists have worked on this. I have met some of them. Along with the notions of repeated creation and repeated dissolution. Philosophers of different schools have propounded various views of time, such as the notion of absolute time, time as relative concept. Various views are there. Space, time, matter as aspects of the same dynamic principle of nature. All these views are there. And I would like to just very briefly mention here, since I have worked on that at length, is that until recently, and if I want to brag, I would say until my book was out, is that there was this idea that India had a cyclic view of time, as opposed to the Judeo-Christian understanding of linear time. And those who said that in cultural studies, lots of misunderstandings arose because of these metaphorical designations and got associated with such concepts as that of history, of progress, of salvation, etc. Because they thought that which is cyclic, there is an automatic repeated recurrence of things and you can never get out of this. But that is not ever the Indian view. And why not? I cannot get into that, that will be a separate lecture. But if you want, you can just read one chapter from a book called A Study of Time in Indian Philosophy. The last one has an appendix called Time and the Hindu Experience. Then you will see why this is a wrong way of designating the Indian conceptual world. This is not the ethos of the tradition. And then the Indian epics and mythology, they weave colorful stories dealing with notions of vastness of time and world cycles, conceived in terms of billions of human years. There are even the ideas of many worlds, and some of which are inhabited. All these ideas were already there in the mythologies. What is amazing is that none of these ideas was seen as being antithetical to religious quest, or as that which renders this world to be characterized as meaningless, that when it is so vast, so enormous, all this is happening, that did not render their idea, their view, that the human life in this planet is a meaningless affair. I'll tell you why I'm saying this. In relevant literature, one finds that all these ideas are worked within a soteriological framework. Actually, I'm sometimes tempted to say that perhaps we should initiate a conversation between science and religion by probing into the age-old question about the relationship between cosmos and telos, and by noticing the distinctiveness of the contending conceptual frameworks within which responses are offered. In cosmos, the world and its purpose. If you frame it that way. An overall survey seems to show that one cannot ignore or underplay the search for meaning and purpose. You cannot just simply ignore. And by saying that modern day's involvement with cosmology and cosmogony as scientific and impose on it a materialistic or naturalistic framework. The expression scientific is itself a value-laden term. It has become so. Consider, for example, Steven Weinberg. Steven Weinberg, the Nobel laureate, he said, the more the universe seems comprehensible, the more it also seems pointless. And his reading of human existence as a farcical outcome. It's an accidental outcome. It could have not been there. He has said things like that. It is very interesting to recall, while discussing the ethos of the Indian culture, that in the ancient Indian tradition, they were already having a certain, they were encouraging a certain attitude to how to look at our habitat, and to do that with religious reverence. And this has ecological implications. They have said that this world is an abode of experience, bhogasthana. Nature provides this physical and biological setting that all sentient beings make use of, and hence it is not to be ruthlessly exploited. Most importantly, it is in here that we humans strive to further our insights into the hitherto unexplored possibilities, the dimensions, both of the natural world and even to aspire to undertake that spiritual journey, which has been so eloquently expressed in the Upanishads as a journey from non-being to being, from darkness to light, from death to deathlessness. The whole thing is taking place here. So you respect this place. Human beings are not only inhabitants of the natural world, as I said. The spiritual dimension of human existence is not to be overlooked. In order to appreciate that ethos, there is one other idea that comes from the Upanishad itself, which we must know. I know it's a lot of ideas which I'm presenting to you, probably difficult to absorb at the same time, but this is a very crucial idea. And this is so old an idea that I cannot but say. They already made a distinction between lower knowledge and higher knowledge. Aparavidya and Paravidya. And this is a very interesting distinction. I can't go into the details. I think you already have probably your head full of too much material right now. But this is very important because, according to this idea, they mention a whole list of sciences: astronomy, astrology, grammar, etymology, phonetics, all kinds of sciences, and all sciences are understood to be included in that, including the Vedas and the Vedangas, that which is considered to be revealed, are all considered to be under the rubric of lower knowledge. Why so? Because their understanding is that what is higher knowledge, or the highest knowledge, that is that which is known in a non-discursive manner. That which gives you the knowledge of the imperishable. That which is, in the Upanishadic metaphorical way of saying, that by knowing which you know all. That one and only principle that is operating. So if you know that, that is only higher knowledge and the less known. By doing that, just see, the whole gap between faith and reason is covered. Religion, as is conventionally understood, then is not the end by itself. That is only a vehicle that will have to lead you to that higher knowledge, para vidya, which is a direct, non-discursive mode of knowing. And then the other thing that I wanted to tell you is this, that in the Upanishads already you know that they were talking about the 3 phases of knowing. How do we know? Something is told to us, something is given. Shravana, that's what they called about that. Then once you have heard something that is given, does it mean that you immediately accept it as knowledge? No. You have your doubts, you have your questions, and that is the stage of intellection, manana. And so this is completely allowed, completely legitimate. So what happens is that those who think, and then after that there is a third one, which is there's a phase of contemplation. Even when you are convinced, you still need, especially if you want to pursue the higher knowledge, you have to dwell on that, even if you are convinced of that. That is nididhyasana. You have to go through all this process to do it. But what is important in the context of science-religion dialogue is that you should never think that religion is only a matter of faith, that there is no room for intellection there, that you cannot doubt it or you cannot question it, and you do not want to know the reasons why what is said, and that if that is done, that is certainly would be a wrong way of understanding the Indian cultural tradition. It is tempting to observe here that the Indian cultural heritage being what it is, the debate of science versus religion is bound to be considered pretty much a useless endeavor if reasoning, logic, observation, thought experiments are taken to be exclusively as a part of scientific methodology. If you think that is a scientific methodology and religion is only based on dogmas, belief, or even blind belief, that cannot be questioned. A science-religion dialogue will miss out on something very important in the Indian cultural context if we assume, who said that, I'm quoting that line from Richard Feynman, that religion is a culture of faith and science is a culture of doubt. This is a statement, which does not tally with the Indian ethos. That is not how it is understood. These things have to be clearly appreciated. And then, of course, I started by telling you that there was this notion of evidence. Now, I don't want to get into that. There has been a lot of discussions on that. And remember, not all, there are we count four religious traditions, 4 major traditions which have come from the Indian soil. What is called the Upanishadic, the Hindu traditions, the Buddhist tradition, the Jaina tradition, and the Sikhism. These 4 traditions have come much later on, Sikhism. But what is interesting is that not all religious traditions have accepted the idea of revelation. The Buddhists do not accept that, the Jains do not accept that, And then there is records of fascinating debates. Why should revelation be accepted and why it should not be accepted? Now, fortunately, I'm also coming to an end. And apart from that, I just want to tell you one more thing. That is the attitudes towards religious diversity in the Indian traditions. That also is a very well-known phrase, that reality is one and the sages call it by different names. Ekam sat vipra bahudha vadanti. Now, this statement has had such tremendous impact on the Indian cultural soil that we can't even really estimate how deep it is. That does not mean that there has not been occasional religious riots or fights. Of course there has been. But by and large, this is respected in India. And what is the proof of that? The proof is that all these traditions which have been persecuted elsewhere, have found their homes in India. For instance, Judaism, one of the oldest Jewish communities live in India. Zoroastrianism, when they were driven out, they found their home in India. In recent years, Tibetan Buddhists, they found their home in India. Dalai Lama is a refugee in India for the last more than 60 years. And all the people that are there. And even more recently, Baha'is have come to India. So India always respected this. This reality is one and the sages call it by different names. Those who want to understand deeply the ethos of that culture must notice all these things. Now I had a bit more to show that how traditional knowledge and modern knowledge are considered nowadays. And one thing, let me just give you the example. For example, because of colonialism, you have to also be aware of the tension that is created between power and knowledge. What passes as knowledge? What passes as a scientific tradition and what is discarded? It's also a matter of power there. It's a question there. And as a result, it's very interesting, although in recent years there has been such enormous development in the domain of medical science. And even then, what is called the indigenous medical practices, often called alternative healing systems, these things are drawing more and more people. And not only India, also Thailand and all these places, they have drawn so many people, for where people are coming for treatment. Medical tourism is on the rise. Then there has been themes which were not considered as a theme for scientific study, like the study of consciousness at a time. And even in the domain of philosophy, in the time of behaviorism, consciousness was considered like a ridiculous theme. And now, with all might, it has come back. Science, philosophy, religion, all are studying consciousness. And this theme has been all throughout present in the Indian culture. Now, cognitive science, psychology, artificial intelligence, neurophysiology, nobody can ignore the theme of consciousness anymore. It's there. Now, this is all, and I just wanted to now end it by to say that one of the most important concerns that needs to be attended, in the way scientific research and technology are made to serve the cause of violence, greed, and power. That is what we have to watch out. Power, knowledge is power. It can be power for the good or for the evil. This is why religions, the paradigms that they have placed before us is very important to take into consideration. There was a time when the success of the human presence in this planet was understood in terms of conquest and subjugation. Today we have reached a phase when we do not need to have those goals anymore. We need to set different goals, some much more worthy goals, which are all the time being provided by our religious traditions. And I think that today we have reached, the human civilization has reached a point where there is a lot of give and take going on, and we all have to find out a paradigm, civilizational paradigm, that can strike a balance between our worldly goals and our ultimate concerns. Thank you.
Thanks for the beautiful lecture. That a lot of topics you covered, so appreciate that. I have one question, that is the creation matter that you talked about. Rig Veda says something on that, but we also know from our Indian heritage that the Trinity, Brahma, Vishnu, Maheshwar, and from childhood we knew that Brahma is the creator, Vishnu is the maintainer, and Shiva is the destruction. And then the whole thing comes back. So two things are happening here. There is the concept of creator, which you said that there is no creator.
No, creation ex nihilo. Creator is there.
Creator.
Brahma is not creating ex nihilo. You see, that is what has to be understood.
Okay, so that is one thing. And also, then after the entire thing is dissolved, again it begins. So it is like a cycle.
Yes.
Kali Yuga.
Yes.
And then Treta
Yes.
and so on. So the concept of time is also cyclic. And you are saying that that
Yes,
is against it.
yes,
So
yes,
please
yes.
explain those things. Thank you.
Well, if you want me to talk on the time being cyclic, it's such a large topic. First of all, fortunately, you can read it, the entire thing, the entire chapter there. Cosmological cycle is a notion of cosmology that the whole creation is going through that. You see, you can have an absolute view of time like the Naya Vaisheshika, or you can have a Sankhya view of time where there is not a separate time but space-time matter all built into the same process of Prakriti, and yet adopt a cosmological model. Time models, there are various views on time. These are all I've written in detail in that chapter, which is just one chapter. If you read that one, at the end, you will find this whole thing. That is not, cannot be taken as equivalent to the notion of cyclic time. It's a cyclic cosmological process is there. And why time view is different from that, you need a little more information, then you will grasp it.
I wanted to ask you a little bit more about views of evil in the universe.
Yes.
So you said that that evil cannot be attributed to the creator. Yes. So then, what is the understanding of why evil is here in the universe?
Well, the thing is that the only reason why I mentioned that is to show that how in the speculation they have avoided the notion of creation ex nihilo. That's what I wanted to bring in. Why this evil is there? The whole Indian understanding of samsara, the world process, is a beginningless process. It is not that it was not there and suddenly came in. This process is going on beginninglessly. That's another notion. So you need a little more, a few more talks on the Indian, actually how the Indian conceptual world is construed. One of the idea is the Buddhists, the Jains, the Hindus, they all agree that this samsara, this world process, is anadi. It's a beginningless. So you cannot say when has it first arrived, when has it first come. The question is how to remove it, but not how it has come. That question would be philosophically redundant because it is always there.